Welcome to the Science and Paranormal with Dr. Yana and Dr. Elliot, where science meets the unexpected, where we delve deep into the mysteries that straddle the line between scientific inquiry and paranormal. Get ready for a mind-altering journey as we embark on this phenomenal discovery together on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Science and the Paranormal. I'm Elliot Van Dusen. My co-host, Dr. Yana Greenberg, is out tonight, and I will be out next week. So we're kind of doing a little switcheroo this week. You're listening to Science and the Paranormal on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans, and also on Roku TV. Thanks for joining us tonight. I have a very special guest tonight, Craig Weiler. He is from the San Francisco, California Bay Area, and he is also an author and science editor for Paranormal Daily News, which is a great news source for anyone into the paranormal and parapsychology. He covers controversies in parapsychology, which we'll talk about a little bit tonight. One of them is the Wikipedia controversy. Some people have heard me talk about how the Society for Psychical Research has created their own Psi encyclopedia as a result of the Wikipedia controversy. So we'll talk about that. He also followed the TED controversy in 2013 and has reported on 10 years of undiscovered research by Russell Gruber of Mirror Worlds Research. He's currently working on his first issue of Parawise, a new magazine devoted to parapsychology and other edge sciences. He is also an associate member of the Parapsychological Association, the author of Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. And he pays his bills with a small construction business on the peninsula of Northern California, where he lives with his wife and just enough cats. And we'll be discussing psychic pets as well later on in the show. Welcome, Craig. Thank you for joining us.
Elliot, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Very fascinating biography, and it's great to see that you're a parapsychological journalist. How did you get involved in the paranormal? What brought you in? A lot of people ask me that question, so I get to ask you that tonight.
Oh, sure. So way back before the internet, I was involved in the New Age movement, and so the psychic stuff had always been there for me. It's just part of my life. I think a lot of people can describe it that way. It's just you get used to like this other part of existence, and that was kind of the way things stood for a while. And then came the internet. And for me, things changed quite a bit because I found blogging and being a writer. This was something that was wonderful for me because now I could put my writing out to the world without trying to find a publisher. That was a whole lot easier, And then from there, I started talking about psychic stuff and blogs, and I started getting a lot of feedback from people about what an idiot I was.
Oh, God. Yeah, I run into that every once in a while as well on certain posts.
And so there were the skeptics, and they were making all these challenges. It's like, why don't you take Randy's $1 million challenge? Psychic ability doesn't exist. Why don't you write about something else? And basically being obnoxious. And boy, did they make a lot of comments. Really drove out my readership. I mean, they really helped it. All this controversy with what I was writing. And so I started researching to find out what the heck they were talking about. So Randy's $1 million challenge, I looked at that and it was complete nonsense. It was basically a publicity stunt. It's like, okay. And then my next thing was, okay, that was easy. That was really easy to debunk Randy's challenge. So why are they so big on this challenge that it's so easy to debunk? I mean, all you need to do is read some of the criticisms of the challenge. All of this was online now, and you can pretty much see that there was something wrong with it. It wasn't hard, but these people didn't seem to read anything that disagreed with their viewpoint. And I thought that was interesting. So, yeah. So, and then there came the science part, and I thought, I'm pretty sure psychic ability exists, but I have no idea whether science has proved it. That's an open question to me. So I started researching that and reading books on it and trying to understand the science. And that just opened it up for me. That was like, oh, holy smokes. There's all this science out there on psychic ability. I mean, a ton of it, a shit ton of science on psychic ability out there. And I didn't know any of it because this stuff wasn't available until the internet. You couldn't find the information.
That's right.
So,
the internet certainly opened things up. I remember the first websites were almost like blog sites, like you said. I remember a classic one I used to go to and converse with like-minded individuals was just paranormal.com. And it was kind of set up like a forums website. And that's all it was, is people posted their experiences and shared their knowledge. And that was great when that came out.
yeah. And there's... And you can get all this research online, and that's been growing steadily. Is you can find scientific papers online. You can find websites of researchers. You can find commentary on the research from the researchers. You can find the skepticism. All of this is now online. And when I first started, that was just barely beginning. The skeptics were already on in full force, but the rest of the world hadn't caught up yet. Anyway,
the skeptics are always out there in the wings. Yeah.
Well, there's a reason for it. They were they have their own media organizations that were already in full swing before the internet. So when the internet came in, they jumped on the internet right away because they are basically an evangelical group. They are promoting atheism. They're promoting their particular brand of it, and so, being zealots, they jumped at the chance to promote their zealotry, much like you would expect, like, with an evangelical or something. It's all about spreading the good word. So that's them. So anyway, from my standpoint, now that I got on the science, I was hooked. Oh boy, I wanted to learn more of this because this was, it's one thing in the New Age, listening to people describe their experiences, and as anybody who's been in the New Age knows, try to dive into and sort through an absolute mountain range of bullshit. Because that's what, people are just making stuff up on the spot and, claiming knowledge of stuff that they obviously have no idea what's going on. And it's full of that. But when you get into the science, everybody's very careful about what they claim. Very careful. You have to publish a paper. The paper typically gets some criticism. There's some, people will redo the studies to see whether, replicate them, to see whether they can produce those results again. They'll add up the results from several studies and find out whether the accumulated amount is actually a better number or whether the effect gets washed out. I mean, there's all these things that they're doing that are very important to actually getting knowledge. So
yeah, and that's one thing that that parapsychology gets criticized for is usually the methodology, or like you said, there's different statistics that you can use to get different results or weaker results. And I personally think that Psi is just such a spontaneous phenomena. Generally, you could have somebody that's really accurate one day, and then for whatever reason, we know that things like calmness and having meditated and having a nice, safe, quiet environment all help open up Psi. Perhaps the person that's doing the study that day, was having something go on in their personal life that's kind of blocking their Psi ability. So it's really hard, and it's not because Psi doesn't exist. It's just really hard to deal with this type of phenomena.
It is, and the scientists actually they know how to handle that sort of issue. And what they do is they know, for example, how big an effect over time is going to be for any particular study. And they'll know ahead of time whether they can achieve what they call significant results. So typically, the study has to be either very big, or you have to put a lot of studies together to get to that point where the results are actually significant. You can rarely just do a study of 10 people, and 10 people, 10 trials is nothing in parapsychology, for example. You have to do a lot of it. You have to have other people, try to replicate it and that. And, after a while, because this effect does go in and out, you're absolutely right about that. Over time, they'll eventually get enough data in there to say, yep, this is real. It's not a very big effect, because in science, it's really tough to do when you're dealing with psychic ability, but the effect is absolutely there. And they've done that in a number of areas.
Yeah, one thing that I always find fascinating is there's a lot of research done on telepathy and telephone calls that have shown statistical significance with psi. And again, one kind of correlation that has popped up with those studies is that usually it's somebody that's really close to you. So it's like another family member or a very close friend. And those people seem to have that psychic connection a lot stronger than if it was a random stranger, which I find fascinating.
Yeah. There's a whole section of literature just on that, about where the connection is stronger. Interesting thing I found out about telephones. A researcher tried that recently, a telephone study. It was a complete disaster. Nobody picks up their phone anymore. Everything goes everything goes to voicemail. Everybody's using text. So nobody, that particular way that we used to interact with that technology doesn't exist anymore, so they can't do any more phone studies. They just can't get enough data.
Yeah, interesting, because they used to have, you'd input say 5 of your closest, friends or associates, and then notify when to phone the participant. And but I guess if people aren't answering their phone, then it certainly makes it a lot more difficult to test. Yeah. Now, you've investigated a lot of controversy as well within parapsychology. One of them is Rupert Sheldrake's biography. I know there were some articles going around about that, and the misinformation on Wikipedia. In fact, Wikipedia so calls parapsychology a pseudoscience, when in fact it's not. It's a social science. And I know that academics have tried to go in there and change it, but Wikipedia has their super editors that will go back and erase what has been put there. So one alternative, which I really like, and I always recommend when I'm teaching parapsychology, tell my students to go check that out, opposed to Wikipedia, is the Psi Encyclopedia from the Society of Psychical Research. What can you tell us about some of the issues with the information you'll find on Wikipedia and the paranormal?
Well, basically what happened is, way back when Wikipedia was getting going, the skeptics formed a group, and there's this whole alphabet soup of skeptic organizations. So this starts out with the Center for Inquiry, which used to be the Committee for Skeptical Investigations of Claims of the Paranormal. It's all basically the same group of people. And they developed a Wikipedia branch of editors. So somebody took the lead. Her name is Susan Gerbic, and she formed an organization where she teaches how to edit Wikipedia and pushes the skeptical format. And she uses private Facebook groups to organize. So you don't really know, and everybody's anonymous on Wikipedia except her. So you don't really know who you're dealing with in terms of the editing, which allows them to claim that they're not doing anything. They have that going on. And because they have these really, really strong views, this gets into Wikipedia because they have been around long enough to get all this administrative ability. And once you claim administrative positions on Wikipedia, you can basically run the show in that area because you can kick off everybody you don't like. By one estimate, they're kicking off between 500 and 1,000 people a day.
Wow.
I don't know how accurate that is. It was from an interview that another reporter did. So, and that was just somebody making that statement. So I'm not quite sure the accuracy of that, but they do kick off an awful lot of people all the time. And what happens on Wikipedia when you do that is you're kicking off people who disagree with you. So on Wikipedia, everybody always agrees of the same thing because there's nobody left to disagree. They've kicked all those people off. And so you get a very insular group there, which also, they don't change. It's part of the mentality of the people that do that is they don't accept change very easily. So you have something that's actually fairly obvious from a scientific standpoint, which is that parapsychology is a science. They are an affiliate of the American Association for the Advancement of Science. They have been since 1969.
That's right.
You can't even say that it's not entirely proven because there was a paper in 2018 that pulled the evidence together and said, here, people, this is basically true. Psychic ability exists. And none of that stuff is allowed on Wikipedia because it doesn't fit their narrative. Again, we're dealing with zealots there, so you can't argue with them. They just kick people off.
It's so interesting, especially it must be for you as a journalist, because I look at, dictatorship countries like North Korea, for example, where the North Korean government controls everything to do with the media. So the citizens there are only seeing, what the government wants to see them. But in our capitalistic corporate world, it's the same thing as well. I know our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, the Canadian version of CNN, gets crucified quite a bit because they're, very liberal and they always kind of report very positively about Justin Trudeau, whereas, other media outlets might kind of give the opposite side. But even there, we're not really getting like unbiased, journalism in a lot of these big corporate network stations. So it's very interesting because, like you said, depending on what they are spewing out, that's how people learn. Like when I'm talking to people, they're like, "Oh, did you read on the news or did you see this and see that?" So people are reading, what's being presented to them, and then they're going out into society and spreading that information as well. So which can be, dangerous if it's not done properly. So very very fascinating industry for sure. How do you think the Society for Psychical Research has come to combat that with the Psi Encyclopedia? I do find it very handy. They certainly have lots of references. Usually you can find those references, unlike Wikipedia. I find a lot of them, or you actually pull up the article. I've actually done that where I'm doing research. I'll pull up the article that they've quoted, gone through the actual article, and looked at their Wikipedia page for what they've kind of said, and I can't find that information in there anywhere. That was either just a wild misinterpretation, or somebody read something in that paper that they wanted to see and regurgitated something else. But I found a lot of inaccuracies or citing.
Yeah, Wikipedia. What they do is they have their system where if they have a study that they absolutely are forced to put out, they will put out what the study was, the skeptical version, and then cut off any rebuttal. So you don't actually see the rebuttals, and the rebuttals are very important to the whole discussion. So you end up with these very distorted views of all these topics, and then they will literally take out valid important, relevant information from biographies to make people look bad. They'll present one-sided things like portraying Dean Radin as a controversial. Dean Radin, by the way, is an absolutely stellar researcher that's very highly regarded in many different disciplines. He's well known.
Some great studies, yeah.
You would never know this on Wikipedia because they focus on the skeptics, and they'll say, well, he's done this research, but a lot of skeptics are very very critical of what he's done, and they make him sound like a flake from the Wikipedia version. So they do that to people by simply removing most of their important credits, and then sort of shoveling in information from skeptics and make it sound like the person's a little bit more on the dodgy side.
Yeah, like almost trying to
Yeah, they are discrediting him.
Yeah, no, I always recommend that people check out the Psi Encyclopedia, because like I said, they list the studies, and you can actually go in and look for studies on Google Scholar and do your own research, and it usually leads to a very positive trail, whereas I find Wikipedia, much like the article said about Rupert Sheldrake's biography, it's a dumpster fire sometimes.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Society for Psychical Research is their encyclopedia is it's balanced, very balanced, so that you will see the positive and you'll see the criticism, and it will all be laid out for you. They don't hold anything back, so you get the entire view of what's happening with that particular subject up to the point where they wrote it. So
yeah, no, it's true.
Yeah, it's a very, very accurate viewpoint of any particular research that particular article is focused on. And I still use it, even though I know most of this stuff, because they have so much from a balanced viewpoint. What they really need to do on top of that is add links to all the stuff that supports it wherever they can find it. And the reason is because that's what AI uses. AI looks at all the links that are associated with these articles and then comes up with suggestions for people. And because Wikipedia does a really good job of providing links, AI will tend to use Wikipedia. So you'll see a lot of Wikipedia influenced AI results at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of people, just a general, rely on Wikipedia. I think it's like it's an okay website if you're just kind of like looking for the gist of something. But if you're looking into anything or you need to rely on something, you have to do your homework on it. But if because they obviously have very good SEO tags, because it's one of the first things that always pop up on Google. Is the first page is Wikipedia. When I'm doing serious research, I usually scroll. Well, first off, I usually search through Google Scholar or other academic websites, ResearchGate and Academia. But I'll scroll past Wikipedia, and then out of curiosity, sometimes I will go there. And like I said, I will look at what they've cited, and I'll try and find that information. But sometimes, like you said, you're either seeing inaccuracies or whatnot. So it's important to make sure people are cautious where they're getting their information from, for sure. With the Paranormal Daily News, how did you get involved writing for them?
I got a connection from somebody at the SPR, Society for Psychical Research, and the main editor was looking for somebody to write on the science side, and my name came up.
Oh, awesome.
And then so the main editor, the owner of Paranormal Daily News, is Jock Brokus, and the very instant we met, we completely hit it off. Just thick as thieves from like moment one. It's like we were just like two people on completely the same path, chatting it up for on all hours and stuff, and just really connected. So
Yeah,
that was a great moment.
Jacques is great. I think I met him at a Rhine course that I was taking, and he had introduced me to Dr. Richard Gallagher's work, the psychiatrist that's interested in demonic possession. So I had actually reached out to Dr. Gallagher last year and invited him to be a guest speaker at the Halifax Paranormal Symposium. And I had mentioned that, saw him on Jacques' podcast, and I thought he was very interesting, and he absolutely loved Jacques as well. So he's a very, likable, relatable, I think, individual. A lot of people have nothing but great things to say about Jacques. So I thought it was really cool that you write for the Paranormal Daily News. With pets, so how I came across having you as a guest is I think you did an episode with Morgan Knudsen on supernatural circumstances about psychic pets, and I might have come across one of your articles talking about psychic pets. And it was funny because on one episode we were actually talking about psychic pets, which is not something that I'm super familiar with. I do know, for example, my dogs, they used to know when my wife was coming home, but what I think happened is I think they learned my behavior. So about a half hour before my wife got home, I would always start supper. And so when I would go over to the stove and start getting the pots ready, I noticed my dogs would climb on top of the couch and start looking out the window down towards the driveway. And then sure enough, they could see the SUV driving down the road because it kind of came down a sloped road, and then you'd have to turn right to come down our street and into the driveway. They'd start barking because they recognized the vehicle. And it was funny because they knew as I got up about a half hour before my wife was due home that I think they started to anticipate that she was coming home. But there's also been lots of cases of psychic pets. One of them was down in Rhode Island that used to live kind of in a hospice care center, and unfortunately the cat's since passed away. But apparently, good at predicting when pass away, and they offer the clients a lot of comfort. You've done a lot of research into this phenomena. What can you tell us about this fascinating phenomenon?
Well, first of all, there's no reason why a pet shouldn't be psychic, just like people are psychic. If we're dealing with a theory where consciousness is fundamental to the universe, which is pretty much the direction you have to go if you accept psychic ability. You can't have a materialist universe because otherwise it makes no sense. So you end up having to take a model of the universe where consciousness is the fundamental thing. You begin with that, and then of course pets are psychic. Not only pets, but pretty much anything living would have some psychic ability because it's just inherent in consciousness itself.
Right.
So you begin there, and then you start looking at, okay, how are the different ways that pets are psychic? And well, one of the obvious issues that you run into is they can't talk to us, and we can't really talk to them in terms of being able to understand each other. Oh, they kind of get it sometimes. You talk to, your pet about something, and they'll kind of get it. They get the tone of the voice or something like that. Behave, stop that. Stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely recognize, I would say, tones. They recognize certain words. Like if I was my rescue min poodle is sleeping underneath my desk right now, but if I was to say his name, I know his head would snap attention for sure. They're very smart.
And then you have the stuff in order to tease out whether a pet is for sure psychic, then you have to actually do a study on it and figure out, well, how do we determine that this pet is psychic? So as you were talking about the dog coming home thing, this is what Rupert Sheldrake did with the dog. Was they had a dog that they knew that that knew when its owner was coming home. So they changed things up with the owner. They'd have the owner come back in 45 minutes, maybe an hour and a half, maybe 3 hours. The point was to mix it up so that the dog couldn't anticipate based on the clock.
Right.
And then they changed the ways in which the owner came home in case the dog was listening for it. So they're really, they made it so that if it wasn't psychic, the dog probably was going to get messed up somewhere. But, what they found was the pooch was responding the moment the owner knew she was coming home. And they found this over and over again. So there was definitely something psychic about it, when they managed to tease out that information.
Right, because there's nobody about to cook supper for their wife, or they didn't hear the vehicle coming down the road. There was like all those factors removed from that situation.
That's correct. Yeah, and that's how you do science. Is you have to remove those confounding factors. So they were able to determine that. Then they tried it with the parrot, which was an interesting thing. So first of all, they established the parrot's vocabulary, and then they had the owner think about words that were in the parrot's vocabulary, and then they simply recorded the parrot to see whether it would speak those words more often. And sure enough, the parrot did. It was picking the words that the owner was thinking about more often than other words in its vocabulary.
Thinking about rather than speaking. That's interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, I find birds extremely smart. I said that to my wife the other day. We saw a bird dig in the garbage can and took like somebody's garbage and flew away with it. And up in Yellowknife, they had giant ravens. And it would be freezing in the winter, of course, minus 40 degrees Celsius. But these ravens were so smart. They would go to McDonald's trash can. They would open up the trash can. They would pull out like a Big Mac container. They'd sit it on top of the garbage can. They'd pop the lid open. And of course, there's always lettuce left over from a Big Mac. And they'd eat the lettuce. And I was just like, man, like talk about, like, that's smart. That's intelligent. And certainly, they're conscious creatures. So I'm not surprised to hear that about the parrot, because parrots are also very, very intelligent birds too.
Yeah, and it brings up the question of like when you have these minds of these, obviously crows are known to be incredibly intelligent. The entire corvid family, really intelligent, and their brains are kind of small.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got this really tiny brain with all this intelligence and large brains with all this intelligence, how much is the brain actually doing here? It makes it an argument for the fact that consciousness isn't entirely just brain signals, and that you're better with the bigger brain and you're worse with the small brain, because it doesn't seem to be the case. There's different factors involved.
Yeah, absolutely. What other case studies have you heard of with pets that they've tried to do to determine whether or not they think they have psychic abilities or not?
Well, there's one. It's called Psi trailing, and that is that an animal that's in an unfamiliar place knows how to get home, even though they have no idea how to get there. That somehow they can sense which way to go home.
There has been a few cases of that, and sometimes it can take a couple of years. But there have been some extraordinary cases where pets have found their way home after a couple of years.
Yeah, and it's not just one, but there've been several like that. The only one that comes to mind was a really, really famous one from the 1920s, a dog called Bobby that lived in Oregon and got stuck in Indiana when the family was doing a road trip. And the dog got out, chased some other dogs, got chased away, and they were there for almost a week. They could not find their dog and finally had to give up and go home. And the dog traveled from Indiana all the way back to Oregon and found their owner.
That's amazing. I know my wife's family, they had this really bad cat and they wanted to try and get rid of him. So they her dad drove way out into the middle of nowhere and dropped this bad cat off and said, good luck, see you later. And sure enough, like within 2 days, it was like that song. The cat came back the very next day. Cat managed to find its way home, and they ended up having to just tolerate it. But it was it's funny how some of them can do that, because they shouldn't be able to detect their scent from like there, like, because you're in the car, so the scent's not like trail. I've done some training when I was I'd always help out our police dog services, and I would set the tracks for the dogs, and like they got us to scuff our feet pretty hard. And there have been some amazing times, depending on the environmental conditions, that I've seen some amazing tracks. One was actually a reverse track that we did. So one night it was a kind of light snowstorm, and a pizza shop got robbed, and the guy literally robbed slices of pizza. He didn't take money; he just wanted pizza, but he held the shop up and stole some pizza, and found him several blocks away. So placed him under arrest. Was the suspect. He was walking with handfuls of pizza, and we had the dog do a reverse track from blocks away, and he actually was able to follow the reverse track of the robber going right back to the pizza shop, which became good evidence in court. So in cases where people have lost their pets, like on vacation, like you just described, or where we've tried to maybe get rid of some pets that are annoying us, and they can still find their way back without having that physical track, there's got to be something else going on. There's also been cases where pets the children in the home distress, and have alerted owners. For example, there's been lots of cases where dogs have let parents know that a kid has fallen into a pool. They've there's service dogs, which can tell if somebody's about to take a seizure and things like that. They're very attuned to their environment. Obviously more so than we are. How do you find telepathy and psychic abilities differ between cats and dogs? Do you find that that one animal is better or stronger than the other?
Well, for my part, I've always had cats. So I have I do enjoy dogs, but I haven't had one since I was a kid. And
Right.
so most of my experiences, with having a connection with cats, and the in terms of which one is better at it, I don't think you could probably I don't think you probably differentiate. Just like it's really hard, with these competitions between cats and dogs, they're probably pretty equal in that regard. Dogs, of course, are far more attentive to their owners, so you're going to see evidence of that psychic ability more clearly with the dog.
That makes sense.
Whereas cats, they might just say, "Up, an argument's coming," and leave the room, and you don't realize that that's a psychic moment with the cat.
Yeah, an
Yeah.
interesting cat story that my colleague, Dr. Daryl Walsh, always tells is when his mom was sick. She used to have the neighbor's cat come visit her all the time, and when she got really sick, like bedridden and not really able to speak, the cat kind of stopped coming for a visit. But ironically, the day before she passed away, the cat had come over to visit her again and got into the house and actually laid on the bed with her up until she passed away. And then the cat disappeared, almost similar to the Rhode Island cat there, Oscar, like I was telling you. It can't just be a coincidence. Like there's got to be something else going on there.
Yeah, absolutely. I've heard stories. There was one that I remember reading. I cannot remember the source anymore. Of a woman was relating that her husband's two cats were all over him the day before he died. Just they were around him constantly and just never let him go. And she said, "I wish I'd paid it. I wish I knew what they were communicating, because I would have enjoyed it more. It just felt like a regular day for me." but these cats knew that something was up and that he was about to pass. So
yeah, they're good at detecting stuff like that.
Apparently, it's kind of scary.
They seem to know. I don't know if like death gives off like a certain smell. They have talked about trying to research that. I know, like I said, Oscar the cat there in Rhode Island, he had correctly identified somewhere around 100 different cases of patients that were about to pass on. So yeah, there's certainly something going on there with pets.
There is. One of the interesting things is that we tend to see this as very controversial in some ways, but farmers, they know. Farmers who are constantly in contact with animals understand that psychic ability is going to be part of it. That, and you actually need that intuition sometimes to know if an animal is in distress. And there are certainly stories of people going, there's something there. I just, I knew I had to get out to the back pasture there, and because something was up, I just felt it.
Yeah.
And how many stories like that are there out there?
Yeah, that's true too. And it's so true because like our pet obviously can't communicate with us clearly like we can, so we have to be able to pick up on those subtle cues, or maybe some of them are even psychic cues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the interactions with pets has all of the ingredients that you need for psychic ability to kick in, and one of them is that you're trying to trade information with your pet, and there really is no other way. The pet's not going to draw a picture for you. They're not going to write it out on a piece of paper. They can't communicate in that fashion to us. So the only thing left for them, and indeed for us, is some sort of a psychic connection. Excuse me.
They're very interesting as well in ghost and haunting cases because there's been lots of cases where a pet, either a cat or a dog, can sense if there's something in the environment, and maybe they're even picking up on natural things that cause us the same kind of response, like if it's infrasound or high electromagnetic field radiation that can cause us to have that sense that we're being watched or whatnot. They're obviously picking up on something in the environment. But I also find it interesting in ghosts and haunting cases as well, as when people report their pet spirit, seeing their pet spirit. I was just talking about a haunted house that we did many years ago in Kentville, and the owners had one of their two basset hounds pass away, and they started to see the ghost of the basset hound that had passed away around their home. And I've had cat owners tell me the same thing, that they've seen their cat appear after death. So it follows the same kind of survival theory that parapsychology subscribes to with human consciousness surviving bodily death. It's the same with pets, it seems. Have you done much research with afterlife communication?
So not formal stuff, but we've had a lot of cats over the years, and we've had a lot of them die on our watch because they grow old, they get died, they grow old, they get sick, they die and whatnot. And so with my animals, what I will do is I will connect with them right after they die. And sometimes it's an incredibly beautiful experience right after they go. And sometimes we had a Siamese, for example, that it took her a long time to deal with her passing, and so I didn't have a lot of communication. But I had this large black cat that was really friendly, and when he passed, it was like shining a light in the room. The whole space just glowed with his energy and his love and his happiness at having gone on this journey with us. That was kind of his message, was the joy of having shared this journey with us. That was he was amazing that way. And then I've had other cats that just sort of, they're kind of in between that.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. Now, are your cats indoors or outdoor cats, or both?
We don't let them roam, but we do let them out back where we have the area cat fenced.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I think that if I had a cat, I always grew up like they're a pet or they're a part of the family. I know there's some people that grew up in the country and they bring old Yeller in the back when he's not doing so well and they put him down. But we never kind of grew up like that. So I always had that fear if I had a cat, like I wouldn't want them outside. And then I've known people that have accidentally let their cat out, and it's like once they get a taste of the outdoors, they drive you nuts to get back out there. So yeah, it's kind of it's a good thing if you can get it, like you said, cat fenced. Or I know my sister-in-law recently let one of hers out. Now it's upset yard,
Oh yeah.
but it's kind of a fat cat, we call it, because it actually is a little bit overweight, but so it won't jump the fence or anything like that. Just loves to go outside and lay in the sun and hang out with the dogs in the backyard, kind of thing. So
We have coyotes out here, so that's not generally a very good idea.
yeah, you gotta keep an eye on them. It's actually funny. My security cameras on our house, I can see different creatures kind of roaming by. I know there's foxes in the area, and there's also raccoons, and but we have a lot of cats in the neighborhood, which is good because especially we have to compost our organics. So in the summer with the heat, it draws in a lot of mice, a lot of rats. So the cats are always out hunting. Which is a positive thing, but certainly they're a big part of most people's lives, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Uh, we have some people living with us, and they have cats. So we have ended up now with 12 cats in the house, which is
Wow. Well,
12. Yeah. Um, yeah. We we got a couple of kittens after many years. Uh, we actually were down to 6 at one point. But 4 of these cats in the house don't belong to us, so we end up with a lot of them running around. They don't.
that's interesting. My investigators for paranormal phenomena research investigation actually has a charity, and when he was working in the Navy at the dockyards, they had a lot of stray cats on the dockyards, and
Mhm.
he ended up building them like a shelter and buying them food, and then that turned into him actually starting a charity, which he calls PAX, Pierre's Alley Cats Society, and he still to this day goes down and looks after all the dockyard cats. So it's and plus he has cats of his own, so that's really interesting. And then others, my next door neighbor, for example, there was a stray cat roaming around the neighborhood, and they started to kind of like leave food out for it. And I laughed at them. I said, "You watch." I said, that cat's going to be in your house soon." And they said, "Oh, no, it's too skittish." And I said, "No," I said, "You watch." I said, "Same thing happened to my mom. She could hear this meowing in her backyard once and looked out, and there was a stray cat there. And so she did the same thing. And now it's kind of the cat comes into her home every night, goes to sleep, eats, has water, and then in the
Yeah.
daytime goes out hunting and always comes back." So sure enough, a couple weeks later, I saw them opening their house door, and the cat was going into the house. So next time I saw them, I said, "I told you." And
Yep.
it's funny. Sometimes you got to gain their trust, and then once you have that trust, they're part of the family. Do have a sort of a comment or a question here from May. She said, "I'm not sure what it is, but these animals seem to have an extra sense that they all use. Perhaps they use a different portion of their brain that isn't detected. I've encountered many animals, and especially wild, who seem to understand me as a human that they do not fear." Have they done any studies on that? I did see a video today. It was on TikTok, so you never know how reliable it is. But apparently, they did a study about a dog, and they had 2 different scents. They had a stranger's scent on a Q-tip, and then they had their owner's scent on a Q-tip, and they had some brain imaging equipment on them. And when they smelled their owner's scent, a certain part of their brain lit up, which would be equivalent in the human brain to like our love area of the brain. Um, Psychic brain scans that they've done on pets, those studies.
So the issue with using scans and stuff to pick up psychic ability is that it doesn't really originate from one particular spot in the brain. And they know
The
this
other
actually
issue with
through.
animals is it's hard to get them to stay still too. Normally, you have to sedate them to get like MRIs and things like that done.
Well, I mean, if you can get it in humans, it's going to be the same area in pets. So,
Right.
if you can find it in a human, then you basically know where that area is going to be in a pet. The problem with something like psychic ability is it's not really centered in a particular part of the brain. If anything, what happens with psychic ability is you're actually turning off parts of the brain in order to access it. Uh, and they know this through psychedelics, because psychedelics are turning off part of the brain rather than turning it on. So you're reducing something in order to have the psychic ability. You're not turning a signal up, you're turning other signals down. So you're not necessarily going to light up one area of the brain when psychic ability is being used. There might be one that's a little bit more active, but it's more going to be sort of a general brain thing. And this is going to be
Yeah,
for
like you said, they've noticed different parts of the brain lighting up on different medical equipment. So it's tough to say. And even consciousness, we don't even know where consciousness really resides. We know that there's certain parts of the brain that consciousness has lit up, but not sure exactly where that's hiding at. So
well, you get into the area of consciousness, and my take on this has been, and a lot of researchers support are pretty much along this way, is you have to change the whole way you look at consciousness, and that it's typical to try and think of consciousness as residing in the brain, maybe parts of the body and stuff like this, when in actuality, it's probably the consciousness is the creator of all of this. So the body
yeah,
is simply a form of consciousness rather than residing in it. The body is consciousness itself. And all you have to do to reason this one out is just say, what comes first? And your answer is going to be experience. Without experience, there's nothing.
yeah, that's true.
So when you start with the idea that there's nothing without experience, then if all we know, if the only thing that we can ever experience is through consciousness, then consciousness must be fundamental. So you go from that standpoint, and then you start to understand why they, when you're doing studies on where where something is going to light up the brain, that really what you're looking at is a filter mechanism, not a not it's more like it's focusing and filtering parts of consciousness through rather than generating it.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it for sure. It's very interesting. I found when I was on homicide and I used to deal with a lot of deceased individuals, it looked like they were literally missing their consciousness. Like the only way I can describe it is it's almost like looking at like a prop at a Halloween store. Like you could tell that there's something missing from that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And I like when they were just being a shell or a vessel, because it seemed to be so true when I was on homicide. Like I said, once you passed away, you could tell that that person was no longer in that body, and that their consciousness would be wherever, whether it's outside the body and couldn't see it. I always find the work of Sam Prina very interesting. I saw an interview where he did, and he said that empirically he can say that he knows, based on his Project Aware studies, that human consciousness can exist outside of the body past clinical death for at least 2 hours. And then after the 2 hour mark, he can't say, it would just be speculation at that point what happens to it. He's not sure if the consciousness, crosses over, if it goes home to where it should be, or if it just the energy dissipates. But what he said is, empirically, he can tell that consciousness can exist outside the body for at least 2 hours. And I found that very, very interesting coming from, a medical doctor, as it's well versed in near-death experiences.
I had an interesting experience along those lines with one of my cats. She had an inoperable condition. She'd been going downhill for a while and had an inoperable condition. And then we had her under while we were talking to the vets about this situation. Her entire intestines were completely blocked. She was like 17 and a half. So she wasn't, in an operation would have just killed her at that point. So we made a decision while she was still under to go ahead and put her down. And so we brought this cat home, and then we buried the cats in the yard. So I had the cat, and I could not bury it. I could not bury this cat. And I walked around the yard holding the cat, and I could not bury her. And then finally, I just sort of took a moment, calmed down, and then I got the idea. And I looked at her and I said, "It's time to go." And then I literally felt this presence pass by me. Just literally gone, and then all of a sudden, I could bury the cat. It's like she'd been under when she died. She didn't really get that she was dead.
Wow.
Yeah. Under anesthesia, you don't really dream or anything, and you don't bring those memories back. So it just sort of shuts you down there. So she didn't. So she really didn't get that she'd passed away. And then once I made that connection, then she understood, and I've never felt this before or since, but just literally of her leaving. This very, very,
because you said when she was under the anesthesia, that's when they would have gave her the chemical to end of life.
Yeah, euthanol.
Wow. That's interesting, but it also makes sense too when you think about it, because with anesthesia, you actually, you're not asleep. It just renders a form of unconsciousness. And I tell people this, like when you're in surgery, they cut you open, your body is still responding as if you're awake. You just you're given so many chemicals. You're even given a chemical that you don't remember. Kind of wipes your memory out. So it's funny because the anesthesiologists they know how much to give you and they know what the drug does, but the mechanism of how it works, they still don't fully understand yet today in science.
Yeah.
But we all trust it. I've had to go under, I think, 3 times, and it's quick. I mean, like I said, they get you to count backwards, and the next thing you know, you got a nurse yelling at you to wake up. So I'm certainly thankful for it, even though science doesn't fully understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
and
about the cat that makes sense to me. That they wouldn't have known what happened, and that's what we often see in haunting situations. Is usually it's a very sudden death. Was unexpected, whereas somebody that's been sick for a long time, say with cancer, and they're dying for 1.5 years. Those types of people are reported to remain behind a lot less than your sudden and accidental deaths.
mm-hmm.
Like you said, your pet would have had really no idea what was happening.
Yeah, for a lot of our pets, we pay to have a veterinarian come out, and we're all gathered around, and we basically we put the cat down in our own backyard with all of us surrounding the animal as they pass. And that's generally it's a lot easier on the pets, and it seems to be a very smooth transition when that happens. That's been my experience. Is the pets seem to have a very peaceful passing, even if they struggle a little bit in the process. But once they go, that seems to be a relatively peaceful thing, because everybody there is supporting them in this transition, and it's all very very positive in terms of how we move forward. Seems to be important.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. Well, listen, I can't believe the hour has flown by already. It was very interesting to talk to you. I knew I'd enjoy our conversation together. I appreciate you coming out on the show. How can people get in touch with you there, Craig, if they want to follow your work? Obviously, Paranormal Daily News is one source. You're also on LinkedIn, X, or formerly Twitter.
Yeah, I just refuse to call it X.
I know.
So you can,
Everyone looks at you like, what? And you just say Twitter and they understand.
yeah. So I'm on Twitter under my own name, easy enough to find. Parapsychology, Craig Weiler, and I'm going to pop up there. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's another way to get a hold of me if you're interested. And I run a space on Quora I don't really connect much with that. And those two, I'm also on Facebook, but those two sources are better than Facebook. Facebook has problems, and I just sort of pop in once a day and check on it and then get the hell out of there.
Oh my God, the spam and the bots now on Facebook are unreal. It's crazy. Where can people find your book Psi Wars? Available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble?
Available on Amazon. That's the easiest place to find it. Psi Wars, TED, Wikipedia, and the Battle for the Internet. So I go through, and in the book I go through what the controversy was, and in between I share the backstory.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for coming on to. We were broadcasting live on the United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM out of New Orleans, and also on Roku TV. And appreciate your insight and your knowledge, and I look forward to continue watching your work online.
Thank you, Elliot. It's been a great interview. I'm just very happy to have been here. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you so much. And we will see all our listeners again next Tuesday. I won't be here. I'll just be traveling back from visiting my daughter in Ottawa, Ontario. But Dr. Yana Greenberg will be here, and I believe she's talking about psychedelics next week. So tune in, and I'm sure it'll be a fascinating conversation. All right. Until next time, take care.